At 6, an inquiry begins in Lincolnshire after a 2-year-old child starves to death. Bronson Battersby is thought to have died alone after his father suffered a fatal heart attack. We'll take you through what we know of a tragic and shocking case. Also on the programme, the King reveals he's being treated for an enlarged prostate just after news that the Princess of Wales has had surgery that will keep her away from public duties until after Easter.
You're getting hundreds of millions of UK taxpayers' money with not a single refugee.
Rwanda's president tells the BBC money spent on the Rwanda deal can be returned if the plan fails. MPs are to vote on it tonight.
Yes, good evening from Parliament, where the debate has been underway again since lunchtime and continues down the corridor in the House of Commons. The votes will follow this evening.
And after a very cold night, prepare for it to become even icier.
And tonight on BBC London, calling time on watch crime, the undercover tactics from the Met that are catching opportunist thieves in the act.
Good evening. We begin with news of an inquiry being underway in Lincolnshire into how a 2-year-old child died of starvation after his father, who was caring for him alone, suffered a fatal heart attack. Bronson Battersby was found in the home of his father, Kenneth, who was 60. It's thought that he died in the days after Christmas and the child was then left alone. There were attempts to check on Bronson's welfare, but by the time the property was entered, it was too late. Joe Black has our report from Skegness, and I must warn you that the details are distressing.
Bronson! Come on then.
Bronson Battersby was known to social services, but his death and that of his father appear to have happened in the most tragic of circumstances. The bodies of Bronson and his 60-year-old father, Kenneth Battersby, were discovered on January the 9th.
Children's services say Kenneth, who was on his own with his son, passed away at home, and that meant nobody was there to give his little boy care, and as a result he also died.
It is a tragedy. I just happened to look out my window and I noticed suddenly this huge police presence, and then I spoke to a couple of residents across the road, and one of them said that they had found a body in there of a child.
Bronson was last seen waving at a neighbour on Boxing Day. The next day, his father arranged a visit from social workers for the 2nd of January. The social worker visited the house that day, but the knock at the door went unanswered, so the police were contacted. 2 days later, a social worker visits again. 5 days later, Bronson and Kenneth Battersby are found dead after the landlady is asked to open the property by social services. That landlady, Maria Clifton Place, didn't want to appear on camera, but she told us she rushed to the address when social services asked if they could gain entry.
I opened the lounge door and Kenny was just laid on the floor, and I knew he was dead. It was just a horrible, horrible tragedy for that poor little boy and Kenny. We're just heartbroken. I classed Kenny as a personal friend. He really helped me out when I needed him.
On social media, Bronson's mother has paid tribute to her little boy and says she will forever miss him.
Just incredible to think that something like this could happen in Skegness, in Britain, in 2024. There are obviously lots of questions to answer, but it's just such a tragedy.
Meanwhile, Children's Services says a rapid review has begun.
In the cases where you are most concerned, and they're unusual, you would be contacting the police, and then you would work jointly with the police, because children's social care social workers don't have the right of entry to a property. Only the police have that in child protection cases. So the police and social care should be working very, very closely together.
Lincolnshire Police are not treating the deaths as suspicious and have referred themselves to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. Joe Black, BBC News in Skegness.
Well, our social affairs editor Alison Holt is with me now in the studio. It's truly awful to think of what this little boy must have gone through before he died. Alison, what is your sense of how this could have happened?
Do you know, I think inevitably with something so tragic, that's the question we all ask. We want answers. Deeply traumatic for the family, also distressing for friends, neighbours and those who were working with Bronson and his father. Now, the missed appointment with the social worker was a red flag, but she followed expected practice. She alerted the police, checked other addresses and visited again. And as we heard there, a social worker doesn't have the right to enter someone's home. Importantly, Children's Services viewed Bronson as a child in need, so needing support. He wasn't on the highest level of supervision, which is child protection. There are also huge amounts that we don't know. For instance, what conversations were had with the family in that time after that missed visit? What checks did the police make? Were there any missed nursery or playgroup sessions? All of these will be for the rapid review to try to answer and give us some sort of sense of whether or not a tragedy like this could be prevented in the future.
Alison, thank you very much. Alison Holt there. Now, within a short space of time this afternoon, there was news that both the King and his daughter-in-law, the Princess of Wales, will be away from public duties for a time for health reasons. It's been revealed that the Princess has had abdominal surgery and will be in hospital for at least 10 days and not back to engagements until after Easter, while the King is receiving treatment for an enlarged prostate. Here's our royal correspondent, Daniela Relf.
Together on Christmas Day, the King, the Princess of Wales just behind him, and the wider royal family attended church on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk. It was the last time the King and the Princess were seen in public. They appeared in good health. In the run-up to Christmas, the King had carried out all of his scheduled public engagements. There had been no indication of any health problems. But this afternoon, Buckingham Palace released a statement. It said, "In common with thousands of men each year, the King has sought treatment for an enlarged prostate. His Majesty's condition is benign, and he'll attend hospital next week for a corrective procedure."
Well, I hope it will open those conversations that men can have with each other and hopefully with their GP. Sometimes we hear men talk about how they find it embarrassing to talk about any prostate problems. But I think it's fantastic that, again, it opens the opportunity to really understand that prostate problems are common and they're nothing to be embarrassed about.
Earlier in the afternoon had come news of the Princess of Wales being in hospital. Like the King, she too had shown no signs of any health issues last month during a full programme of engagements that included hosting a carol concert at Westminster Abbey. But Kensington Palace said yesterday afternoon she was admitted to this central London hospital for what they described as planned abdominal surgery. She's expected to stay here for 10 to 14 days and is unlikely to return to royal duties before Easter.
I think based on her age, based on her fitness, and based on how she appears in the public from what I can see, I think her recovery should be straightforward. And as long as she looks after herself and not rush back to her very, very busy schedule.
And so you're the volunteers for this evening?
Palace officials have not disclosed why the Princess has had surgery. They say they appreciate there will be interest in her condition, but she wants to keep her personal medical information private and would like to maintain as much normality as possible for her children.
And Daniel is here in the studio now. Two senior members of the family. We had news about them within about an hour of each other. Daniela, what are the implications?
Yeah, it's been a really difficult afternoon for the royal family, as you say, with those two important health bits of information, both within a couple of hours each other. And what it means is that two senior members of the royal family are now going to be out of action for some considerable amount of time. The Princess of Wales, we're told it could be 3 months before she is back doing any kind of public duty. For the King, he will have an overnight stay in hospital next week for his procedure. And again, he could be out of action for a few weeks. It's clearly a problem for Buckingham Palace. It's a tricky situation, but they are keen to stress that although it's not ideal, constitutionally, it isn't a problem because the King is still able to conduct some of his administrative duties. So all that red box work we hear about and some of the paperwork he goes through, he will still be able to do that. His procedure will mean that he just can't get out and about on public duties for a little while. Just in addition, one added problem, of course, is the Prince of Wales, William. He is also going to scale back his duties too in order to help his wife recuperate.
Daniela, thank you very much. Now, within the next few hours, MPs will be voting on the Prime Minister's landmark Rwanda bill. Earlier today, the President of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, told the BBC that he would give the UK money back if migrants are never sent there. Here's our political editor, Chris Mason.
The government has promised to stop the boats. The numbers are down, but migrants keep coming. This was Dover this morning. The Rwanda plan is about putting people off attempting this crossing, but no one who's made this journey has been sent there yet. So what does the Rwandan president make of it all?
It is the UK's problem, not Rwanda's problem.
But you're getting hundreds of millions of UK taxpayers' money with not a single refugee.
It is going to be used on those people who will come. If they don't come, we can return the money.
If people don't come, we'll return the money, he says. The UK has already handed over £240 million.
Is your party too split to back the bill?
Back in Westminster, the Prime Minister's trying again to get his Rwanda policy to work. For nearly 2 years, it's been stymied by the courts. The Labour leader who'd scrapped the Rwanda plan sought to mock Rishi Sunak over asylum seekers who'd gone missing.
Only this government could waste hundreds of millions of pounds on a removals policy that doesn't remove anyone. But he still hasn't answered the question. So I'll try again. What progress has he made in locating the 4,250 people his government has apparently lost?
The Prime Minister dodged the question, but hit back.
We have worked through a record number of cases and returned a record number of people back to where they've come. All of that is a plan that is working, and we can see that it's working because the numbers of people coming to this country are down by over a third.
18 months ago, this plane was due to take some migrants to Rwanda, but at the last minute, using what are dubbed pyjama injunctions, the European Court of Human Rights said no, the plane never left. Some Conservatives want the default legal position to be that these rulings are ignored.
The foreign court overrode English judges, overrode the will of the government, overrode the will of the British people to control our borders and stop the boats. That's a problem with the foreign court.
And look at this, the former Home Secretary and the former Immigration Minister now leading the criticism of the government.
It's on us. We have the power to fix this, and we have the responsibility. So let's use the opportunity we have today with the amendment that we've brought forward to resolve this.
Some aren't convinced and argue it's wrong to deny people rights that others do have.
History shows us that that sort of legislation can put a state on a pretty slippery slope.
Whilst, of course, Parliament can legislate to do whatever it likes in domestic law, simple fact is you cannot legislate away international law.
The debate continues here. The votes will then follow well into the evening. And on the question of those injunctions from the European courts, ministers have been trying to reassure Conservative sceptics that their own plans are robust, but their first attempt to do so at breakfast time this morning didn't survive until lunchtime, and the rebels are pretty scornful. The whole debate of the last couple of days has left a bad blood within the Conservative Party as we head towards these votes. And one development in just the last couple of minutes, Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionist Party saying that they will vote against the whole package when the big vote comes, expected in the next few hours. As things stand, the government maintains a quiet confidence that despite all of this noise, when that big vote does come, it can win.
Chris Mason, thank you. Figures for inflation in the UK in December have come in higher than expected. After November's figure of prices being 3.9% higher than a year ago, it was hoped that inflation would continue to nudge downwards. But last month it was 4%, partly because of tobacco duty going up. Here's our chief economics correspondent, Darshini David.
But some of that hit is fleeting, and elsewhere a lid's been kept on bills.
We recently invested in the Pro Seal sealing machine, which can seal up to 60
meals per minute.
Former Warrington Wolves Rugby League player James has had much to tackle since setting up his healthy ready meals company, with creative moves to curb prices and score more customers, despite rising costs.
Energy, for example, went from 10 pence per kilowatt up to 70 pence per kilowatt.
So what do you do about that?
Well, you have to sort of take it on the chin a bit, to be fair, and look where you can save in other areas.
Up and down the country, businesses and households have been juggling furiously to soften the blow of the cost of living crisis. The encouraging news, as the government has noted, is inflation more than halved over the course of last year, and for many has been overtaken by wages growth. But the question for the Bank of England is, has inflation eased enough in all areas?
If inflation gets down to, say, 1.5%, a lot of that is down to energy, so household energy bills are falling. Some of that's down to food, but we are seeing broader-based falls in inflation as well. And I think that means the Bank of England can cut rates several times in the second half of this year. There's a question as to when it starts. If we get some tax cuts in the spring, that might delay it a little bit, but we are talking about a rate cut by the summer.
Back on the production line in Warrington, those lower energy costs will help knock profits into shape, but other items will remain dearer.
I do think that we're going to 2024 having a better starting point in terms of prices. They have come down some. I feel like they'll continue to come down, but what I see is that this will be the new norm. I don't ever think that things will go back to the way that they were 2 years ago.
Stocking up on ready meals, they argue here, helps customers budget. Some risks to prices from the disruption in the Red Sea remains, but it's not a reality. Meanwhile, the squeeze is easing for some, and some reversal of higher borrowing costs will allow more to savour a little relief. Doshini David, BBC News.
And the time is just after 6:15. Our top story this evening. A review is launched after 2-year-old Bronson Battersby's death. He's thought to have died alone following his father's fatal heart attack. Still to come, the serial fantasist revealed by police videos in Cumbria.
On BBC London, flooding, wildfires and drought, the potentially lethal climate risks facing Londoners as the world warms, and how the cost of living crisis means fewer children are being read to.
Children suffering from leukemia in the UK are starting to be treated with a drug that is much kinder to their bodies than chemotherapy and can be administered at home. As our health reporter Michelle Roberts explains, it means the children need to spend far less time in hospital.
Life's getting back to normal for 11-year-old Arthur. He's been clear of cancer for almost a year now. He was one of the first children in the UK to try out a new type of cancer drug. Blinatumomab, or Blina, can replace big chunks of aggressive chemotherapy.
The news came that actually there was still some residual cancer, so that particular chemo phase had not worked as expected.
For Arthur, Blina was then the only real option to tackle his blood cancer.
You can see the PICC line that goes into his pyjamas, and actually there on the right-hand side, the pump that was separately at that point, so not yet in the backpack, so everything could be...
All of the kit can be carried in a small bag. Although he had to wear it day and night, it gave him back his freedom. Doctors say it's a much kinder alternative.
Hello, Arthur. Come on in.
Hello. And could be a game changer for kids with B-cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia who struggle on chemo.
Chemotherapy are poisons that kill the leukemic cells, but also kill and damage normal cells, and that is what causes their side effects. Blinatumomab is a gentler, kinder treatment that doesn't have the same side effects as chemotherapy, but can cure just as many patients as chemotherapy.
That bead represents chemo.
It's been a long, tough journey for the whole family, made somewhat easier by Blina.
It made it feel like a lot freer. It also freed up some of Mum and Dad's time, and they could finally do work again instead of having to go to hospital with me.
New Year was when we found out that the Blina had worked and that there was no residual cancer, and so that was just amazing, and so we had double celebrations there.
Blina's already used in adults, but it's not yet widely available on the NHS for children. Given its promise as a kinder, gentler treatment, Arthur's medical team hope it could be in the future. Michelle Roberts, BBC News.
Now tonight could be the UK's coldest for years. Most of the country is set for sub-zero temperatures until the weekend. Yellow warnings for ice and snow have been issued across all 4 nations, with thermometers expected to plummet as low as -15 degrees Celsius as Arctic winds sweep in. In Scotland, snow forced schools to remain closed today, and we can join our correspondent John Johnson now on Leeu on Shetland. How is it for you, John?
Well, Michelle, heavy snow showers have been sweeping across Shetland all day. At times we've had blizzard conditions and a biting cold wind here in the islands. Driving conditions are really challenging, and the police tonight are advising motorists not to drive unless absolutely necessary. Now, all schools across Shetland are closed tomorrow. That's the 4th day in a row. Down at the airport, it's been closed today. All flights in and out of the island. We haven't had any flights for 2 days. Now, Shetland is driven by the weather. It's a community spirit here. Everybody looks after everybody, but yet there's been a silver lining too, because children have enjoyed sledging in the snow, and also some have also been skiing. Now, this amber weather warning lasts across the north of Scotland, including Orkney and Shetland, until 6 o'clock tomorrow night. And on a lighter note, Shetland welcomed a visitor from the Arctic. A beluga whale was seen swimming off the west of the islands. Perhaps a sign that the cold weather is a welcome for them.
John, thank you very much. We will have a full weather forecast as usual before the end of the programme. Now, the MP for Rochdale, Sir Tony Lloyd, has died at the age of 73. Sir Tony represented Labour in the area for over 40 years and said last week he'd been receiving treatment for blood cancer, but that the illness had progressed. A new BBC documentary is revealing the extent of the lies spread by a 22-year-old woman who falsely told police in Cumbria she'd been raped by men who were part of an Asian grooming gang. She was jailed last year, but Anna Collinson has been investigating the web of deceit created. You may find some of the details in her report upsetting.
I guess you can probably guess what's going to happen. If you just listen to my
This is the moment Eleanor Williams was arrested in 2020. A court would later find that she had repeatedly lied about being raped, which legal experts stress rarely happens. Exclusive access to police footage shows it started at 16 and then escalated.
He had a knife, he was waving it around.
By 18, she claimed she was being trafficked by an Asian gang.
Whichever man was willing to pay the most money, you go with.
The police treated Williams like a victim, but suspicions began to arise after they spent 2 days driving her around Blackpool, where she said she'd been recently trafficked to and was unable to provide any leads.
Was it on that route that you took us on, or was it somewhere else?
I don't know.
Not sure.
That's when I first started wondering myself personally, is there any truth in this?
The following week, her lies unravel further when police are called to her home.
You all right?
Injured and seemingly intoxicated, she makes more claims of being trafficked. An investigation takes place, and this is the innocent young man she accuses. CCTV from that night shows the pair met by chance in Preston when he asks her for a lighter. It's Williams who pursues a conversation. She's then seen on camera in Barrow and Furness walking home with no visible injuries. But when police arrive at her flat 20 minutes later, this is what they find.
I'll help you. I'll help you. Shall we get you an ambulance?
In court, a judge ruled these injuries were self-inflicted and that she was play acting.
Weed. Okay. Use space. Okay.
He also found there was no evidence that she was mentally unwell.
You see on this is an evolution. You've got an awful allegation in 2017, a much worse allegation in 2019, and then weeks later, boom, it properly snowballs into a massive, multi-handed, organised crime group.
Cumbria Police say this is a totally unique case and want to reassure genuine victims that they will be supported. Williams' lies about an Asian grooming gang led to a spike in hate crime in Barrow and damaged the mental health of the men she wrongly accused. And yet, we may never know. Why did she lie? Anna Collinson, BBC News.
The full story is in Lieu, the fake grooming scandal, which is at 9 o'clock tonight on BBC Three and on the iPlayer. A rap trio from Belfast are making their acting debut in the first Irish-language film to be included at the Sundance Film Festival in the US. Kneecap, who've had sold-out gigs in the UK, Ireland and America, are starring alongside Michael Fassbender. Our culture correspondent Charlotte Gallagher has been speaking to them.
Kneecap are at the forefront of Irish hip-hop, rapping in both Irish and English. Their self-titled film, a semi-fictionalised account of how they got together, also blends the two languages. And it's the first Irish language film to be included at the Sundance Film Festival.
They called our generation the ceasefire babies. So it's about these three fellas trying to find, their place in the world, and it's about, their identity and stuff like that. So everybody has this idea of the Irish language that, we all just sit about pubs playing fiddles and talking about grammar. Do you know what I mean? When in actual fact, these three characters don't really mention the language that much the whole film. They're selling drugs and talking about, youth culture. You've heard of intergenerational trauma, right? Right. Our history has become our biology.
Kneecap are not without controversy. This mural showing a police Land Rover on fire did upset some local politicians. But the band say they're about making music, not stirring up tensions.
You had the song Get Your Brits Out, which that has nothing to do with a mass exodus of British people from the north of Ireland or anything like that there.
Which people like to believe is what
people like to believe.
You see this kind of aesthetic as well, where people are wearing tracksuits and the kind of clothes you wear. It's associated with a type of scumbaggery, and people just have that image straight away.
I think it's the balaclava.
But that's what I was just about to say that as well.
About your Adidas coat.
With the balaclava as well, people look at this and think it's a kind of sectarian statement or something, where it's the opposite.
Their name is derived from so-called kneecapping, where people are shot in the legs by paramilitaries. But Kneecap say their name isn't a celebration of violence.
We're glad that there's peace right now, we're not trying to stoke any fires, and we're all the same people, do you know what I mean?
And the pioneers in Irish rap gave me a language lesson before I left.
Támuid an seo ML Farste.
Támuid an seo ML Farste.
Le Kneecap and you.
Le Kneecap and you.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
No problem.
What's thank you in Irish?
Garamaigat.
That's not easy.
That was I'm here with Kneecap today in Belfast. Apologies about the pronunciation. Charlotte Gallagher, BBC News.
Brace yourselves, time for the weather now with Chris Fawkes.
Yes, indeed, Michelle. Well, earlier we were looking at the snow problems in Shetland. This is actually a picture from Lerwick, where we've seen the snow really piling up over recent days. And it is in Lerwick where we've got the greatest snow depths on our charts at the moment, 21 centimetres. There'll be some bigger drifts around, mind you. I think the weather's actually going to get even more disruptive across the northern half of the UK over the next 24 hours. Look at these really bright thunderclouds working in. Yes, you could get some thunder snow. They're piling into northern Scotland, where we have a Met Office amber weather warning, and I think we could see some pretty large accumulations of snow, 5 to as much as 15 centimetres over the next 24 hours or so. A much greater risk of snow pushing in across Northern Ireland, where I think we could see 5, maybe 10 centimetres of snow. And I wouldn't even be surprised if we saw some of those storms cross the mainland of Scotland into northern England. So you might even see a few centimetres elsewhere. Just bear that in mind. Otherwise, it's going to be another cold and frosty start, an icy start to the day. Plenty of sunshine around, but those snow showers continue to affect northern Scotland. Blizzards, poor visibility, and snow showers continue to pile in across Northern Ireland. A few wintry showers for the far west of Wales and also for North Sea coast of England, but otherwise dry and very cold. And then tomorrow evening, there's a chance of seeing some snow showers coming in from the Irish Sea to affect North Wales, parts of North West England and North West Midlands. The amount of snow you see from those will vary a lot from place to place. On into Friday, well, temperatures just lift by an odd degree, and what that will do is it will mean that the snow in Scotland will tend to become confined to the hills. At lower elevations, you're more likely to see sleet and rain. It's another fairly cold day, but those temperatures notably up by an odd degree or so. You probably won't feel that much of a change until we get into the weekend. That's when much milder weather conditions will spread in. But with this milder air comes some very strong winds. Could get gusts up to 70 miles an hour or so this weekend. Michelle.
Chris, thank you very much. And that's the BBC News at 6. You can keep up with all the latest developments on the BBC website, of course. But now it's time to join our colleagues for the news wherever you are. Goodbye.